When it came time to settle the property, I was pleasantly surprised that one simple mistake on the contract of sale allowed me to claim $50,000 straight away at settlement. Hi, I'm Andrew Wright, Principal of Professional Southport, and this is the Andrew Wright Property Podcast. I've built a multi-million-dollar property portfolio, delivering a seven-figure annual rental income, and led my real estate team through thousands of sale and lease transactions. In each episode, I share real deals and strategies that will help you find, fund, and operate profitable property deals. The aim of this show is to provide education and build a community of like-minded investors who can collaborate, share insights, and help each other in each other's journeys. You can make excuses or you can make money, but you can't do both. So come and join us.
Back to the Andrew Wright Property Podcast. Today's story is about turning a dead end into a deal. Andrew bought a church on a 1,500 square metre block of land aiming to subdivide, hit a wall with services and walked away with over $200,000 profit after leasing it and selling it as a going concern. Let's unpack exactly how and the traps to avoid. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
How you going, Adam?
I'm well. First thing I want to ask, for people who've been listening to the first few episodes of this podcast and have heard, you don't normally sell.
No, I don't. It was just the circumstances at the time that led me to sell. It's not part of my strategy, but sometimes circumstances change.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm really interested to hear as to how and why. But look, let's jump into it. Tell me about this particular deal we're talking about today. So it was a church.
Yeah. So part of my personal job description that I set myself is I look at every new listing that comes online every single day, every day of the year. So a church came up in Ipswich, North Ipswich, and it looked cheap to me. It was asking offers over $490,000 and decent-sized block of land. And when I had a look at aerial photo online, I could see that there was a large chunk of land behind the church. The church was built right up to the front footpath. There was a driveway already down the back, which was about 4 metres wide, which I immediately thought, wow, that's a subdivision opportunity.
Right. So
that's what attracted me.
That was the plan.
Absolutely.
Okay, knock it down. And so what was the subdivision plan then?
Well, I didn't actually have a chance to do due diligence on this site. It came up online on about a Thursday. I rang the agent immediately. There was an open home 2 days later on a Saturday, but I was busy working as an agent and I didn't have time to go and have a look at it. So at that time, I didn't know exactly what the subdivision plan was. I knew there was a big chunk of land at the back we could do something with. And before I had time to do due diligence, I had to go and sign a contract that weekend, and I bought the property sight unseen without doing a lot of due diligence.
Andrew, every episode, mate, I feel as though there's quite an element of risk to what you're doing.
You got to trust your gut sometimes. So.
Okay, so sight unseen. You've had a look online. You've seen the pictures. You've seen the church. You've seen some. There's a lot of land there. Look, again, talking to we have a lot of listeners of this podcast who know a lot or a little about property development and investment. Did you know that you were going to be able to subdivide? Do you need to? You've got to get planning approval and things for all of that. What made you think and take that risk, thinking, well, that's my strategy. That's what I think I can do here.
Look, I again, the timeframes were so quick on this one that I did not do sufficient due diligence on the site, and it ended up that the subdivision wasn't practical. I couldn't actually do it at that time, and that's why I ended up selling the site. So the story of it went along the lines of the agent had an open home. There was, I think, 27 people there at the first open home on the Saturday. I submitted an offer of $485, trying to negotiate the 4 offers over $490 purchase price. It wasn't accepted. the agent quite rightly said, look, to do the best thing by the seller, he's asked me to do an open home and, see what the
you
market
tried
will
to
pay.
do that before the open
Absolutely.
home.
When you
Right.
see something, you've got a gut feeling this is for me, you have a crack, try and get a property under contract immediately, take it off the market with a due diligence clause. So that's what you need to do because, you miss out on the good deal. So
Okay,
I tried to get
that's a lesson in itself there. It's
Absolutely.
a big one. So
tried to get under contract. The agent
what's it? Just can I just ask? Sorry to
Sure.
interrupt you there. What is a due diligence clause, and how does that work?
Look, I'm not even a bush lawyer. I just know the very basics. But typically, when I draft a contract, I'll usually say this contract is subject to and conditional upon the buyer having a 14-day due diligence period during which, for any reason,
Right.
the buyer has the right to pull
Okay.
out of the contract.
Because I just asked that
And get their
in
deposit
respect to that very point we're making, where you see something, you go for it.
Absolutely.
But that gives you 14 days to basically walk away.
Yep.
But gets it off the market, gets it into your hands.
Stops the competition.
Yep. Should it tick all the boxes, you're then good.
Absolutely.
Okay, understand. Sorry. Now, so 485 wasn't accepted.
Wasn't accepted.
Goes
I think
to an
this
open home.
was a Thursday, and
Yep.
then 2 days later, the open home's on. Ipswich is 1 hour's drive from the Gold Coast.
Yep.
I couldn't make it there. I had my own open homes to do as an agent.
Yep.
The agent rings me up. Oh, Andrew, look, we've had 27 people through the open home, 10 church groups amongst those 27 wanting to use the premises for themselves.
As the church. Okay.
We've got an offer here already of 510,000, 20 grand above the asking price, but that offer is subject to the church congressional panel of people in the church agreeing to buy the site, and they're meeting in 2 weeks' time. So there's a 14-day condition there. Well, the other people in the church need to agree to go and buy this site.
Right.
The agent said, the owner doesn't really want to wait that 2 weeks. What can you do? I said, okay, bang. I'll offer 515 cash, no conditions, settlement 60 days. And that provided some certainty to the owner. Paid an extra 5 grand, which ended up being 25 grand above the asking price. But I took it off the market, sight unseen, no get out of jail conditions with due diligence, and also with a commercial contract of sale, there's no 5-day cooling off period. So
Right.
there's no way out of it.
So you're in.
I'm in.
You're in.
Unconditional.
But let's just talk your financing at this point. You're using equity from...
No, this particular one, I was going to sell some shares from my share portfolio to just fund the whole purchase.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Didn't work out that way. My kiss of death on any share market investment, there was about another 50% loss over that 60 days when I was going to sell. I thought, do I really want to trigger another $250,000 loss on these shares, or do I want to finance it? So I knew at that stage that usually with a major bank will not do a lease stock loan on a commercial property unless there's a 2 or 3 year lease in place. Mm-hmm. And with a church, at best, even if there was a 2 or 3 year lease, they'd probably only lend 50% LVR on it. So I knew I couldn't get a loan from a bank. So I rang a mate of mine who had cash from another property that he'd sold, and he was getting 4.5% in a term deposit. I said, mate, how about you lend me 80% on this church? I'm going to subdivide it. I'll pay you 8% interest, nearly double what you're paying. He said, oh, that sounds good to me. So I used him. I offered to pay his 2 grand of legal fees to prepare a first mortgage and a loan agreement. 8% interest. He was happy, doubled the interest he was earning. And instead of selling all my shares at a massive loss, I used a private lender
Right.
to finance the deal.
Just with the few things you mentioned about your share dealings at times, Andrew, I think we've got a whole other podcast in that at another time.
Yeah.
Maybe not as successful as your property deals.
No.
But okay, so you've got it covered through a mate.
Yep.
And just to finish off on that, on the financing, were you then expecting that to be a longer term loan with him, or were you expecting would you plan for the shares to regain momentum, pick up that value, and then get that paid out quickly?
Yeah, so on that, most private lenders will only initially have their lawyers document a 12-month loan agreement, and then with the option to extend at the end of that 12 months, and that's exactly what we did. So My game plan at that stage was actually to get development approval, most likely to subdivide the place and then revalue it at a higher value.
Yep.
Get a tenant in the front church, and then after revaluing it, go to a major bank and hopefully get a loan for 50% of it, because there was a new 3 or 4 year lease on the site and it was increased in value with a subdivision approval.
Sure.
That was my plan.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did happen?
Yeah, well, look, I ended up, we might insert for the YouTube watchers the subdivision plan. I actually got a surveyor in and we created a beautiful subdivision plan which showed the 4 metre wide existing driveway and a separate block of land down the back that we could subdivide with a view of building a second dwelling.
Okay.
So I got those plans done.
So it's just going to be 2? What
say we're going to leave the church where it was.
Right.
Possibly change that to a residential property. I had building designers go in and measure up the existing floor plan in there, and the subdivision plans were prepared by the surveyor. I met with the town planner.
Is that because, just on that, was that because you could get a better rent for a residential place rather than it being what it was and being used as a church?
I wasn't sure, but because the zoning of the site was called in the Ipswich City Council, it was called a place of worship. It could only be used as a place of worship. So from a leasing point of view, I thought the tenant pool was quite small, just trying to target a church. So I thought if I could open up the change of use to residential, given the housing shortage in the country, it'd be a lot easier to rent the place as a residential. And it had two levels, at a separate level downstairs with 3-door access and then steps going upstairs. And I just thought there was plenty of potential to use the church as a residential property.
Sure.
And people love the character of a church. And there's plenty of examples where churches have been converted to residential property.
Sure.
And I got appealed. I was attracted to that idea of, why don't I do a church to residential conversion? Yep. How appealing would that be? So I went down that track, and just before I went to a pre-lodgement meeting with the council and the town planner, I knocked on the neighbour's wall because the town planner said, look, to get this through, the council's going to need a legal point of discharge for water and sewerage. And there's a steep slope at the back of this site, and sewerage doesn't go uphill, Andrew. You've got to have a place for it to go. So I went and knocked on the neighbour's yard because from the dial to dig and the due diligence we did, the sewer connection in the neighbouring property was the only one that I could connect to.
Right, so that was the only possibility.
That was the only possibility. So
this is going to be a sticking point with your whole plan.
This is where the disaster of the subdivision at that time just wasn't going to work. So if I couldn't connect to that, you could have a look at a pumping station, which was going to cost 20 or 30 grand to have a pump there that would pump the sewerage uphill to the sewer connection, which was on a higher level on my property. Or I could consider a $30,000 septic tank, but the local council did not allow septic tanks on residential zone properties there. It wasn't in a rural environment. They didn't want septic tanks. Mm-hmm. So the only option really, because I didn't want to waste 30 grand on a pump and then have to service it every year, was to connect to the neighbouring property sewer.
So you've gone and knocked on
the door. How you going, mate?
I've
I've just bought the church next door. I want to build a house down the back. I need to connect to your sewer. He said, well, I don't want someone building another house next door to me. I don't want all that noise. I don't want you digging up my backyard to get to the sewer. And I thought, oh, okay. Shook his hand and walked away with a tail between my legs thinking I've just wasted 6 or 7 grand with my town planner, my surveyor, my building designer. And I cancelled the pre-lodgement meeting and it was just money down the tube. So I lost 6 or 7 grand during that process. Completely lack of knowledge, lack of experience. I didn't have a mentor, a property developer mentor guiding me along the way who would have told me straight up front, well, got to make sure there's a legal point of discharge before you go and do subdivision plans. Yep. But I just made a mistake. I didn't have the experience.
So what are you left with at this point then? So that obviously that plan's gone.
Yep.
You've bought at, what was it, 515?
515.
You've got the church.
Yeah.
At the moment, there's no tenant? Or
No, it's empty. And this is another thing that when it came up to settlement, one of the challenges, it came one, no bank will lend on an empty church.
Yep.
And two, my private lender, the loan agreement that came through required a certificate of currency for the building had to be insured, noting the lender as the responsible party. So if the church burnt down, my mate who was lending me the money would get his money back. And when I went to insure the property, it cost me $1,500 to insure. Well, it was triple the price because no insurance companies wanted to insure an empty church. They thought it was a very high risk for people that had been there before that might come and burnt the place or move in and squat there or something.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Anyway, I think it was $5,500 I paid for insurance for this empty church instead of $1,500, and I had to do that prior to settlement.
So you've got $5,000 insurance. Your plans for a subdivision are
wiped.
Can I say up the shitter?
Yep. Yeah.
Can we?
Well, shit doesn't go uphill.
No,
so,
that's what. Pardon the pun. You've now got you're paying 8% on 80% of 515.
Well, that was what the loan agreement said. But I was blessed by another thing that we can talk about. I ended up getting $48,000 back at settlement, so I ended up paying $468,000, not $515,000.
How?
Churches. This is my understanding. So check with your own town planner or whatever if you're doing a deal with a church. But in Australia, most churches are, I believe it's charitable entities. They don't pay income tax at the federal level. At the state government level, I don't believe they pay stamp duty when they buy. They don't pay land tax on the land holdings. And at the local council level, in most councils, they don't even pay rates.
Right.
So the agent, when he came to sell this property, was told by the church that, they don't pay tax. So it doesn't matter what you put on the contract of sale. You can say GST is included in the purchase price. We don't pay anything. So the contract of sale was $515,000, including GST.
Right.
Now, when it came to settlement, my lawyer did a search and said, well, hang on, Andrew, this church is actually registered for GST, which means the tax office is going to ask them to remit 1/11 of the purchase price as GST. 1/11 of 515 was 46,800 and something. Which means that I was able to claim it back.
And this.
So I paid 515. I claimed 46,800 back. It ended up only costing me 468,000 for something I was quite happy to pay 515 for. And instead of I got an 80% loan from my mate on the property. I got $50,000 straight back. I had hardly any of my own money left in the deal.
Wow.
Yeah, awesome.
Wow. So that's all due to an error on their, not an error on their behalf.
Definitely not the agent's fault. I would say the solicitor for the church should have been asked to prepare the contract of sale, and I think the church made a mistake of just getting the agent to prepare it without checking with the solicitor.
And it's a tick box, isn't it?
Tick a box. GST is included in the.
And that's ended up in a $50,000 windfall.
$50,000 windfall for me, and the church would have had to submit that $50,000 to the tax office.
And a $50,000 loss for them.
Yeah,
there's a lesson in
because
that,
of a mistake.
There? Yep. Always use lawyers.
Look, this is such an important thing. I mean, I sold a $2 million site under auction once at Talabudra to a developer, and the contract, same thing, GST included in the purchase price. The seller had to submit GST, and he got the wrong advice from his lawyer on that one. He did actually seek advice of the lawyer, and on a $2 million property, you're talking $200,000 mistake.
Wow.
So I've seen it before, and I'm sure there's been plenty of other examples where buyers have made mistakes with the GST clause on a commercial contract of sale. And it doesn't matter how many deals you do, you really do have to talk to an accountant and a lawyer.
Every time. Fantastic. Okay, so you've had that windfall, a lucky break.
Yeah, lucky break.
But you're still now left here with a church, an empty church that's cost you $5,000 to insure.
Yep.
You can't subdivide.
Yep.
And your plans are down the drain. You're paying 8% on what you've borrowed.
Yep.
What do you do?
Well, plan B, I just said, look, I'm just going to rent this thing out as a church and hold it long term. So fortunately, because I bought the property so well and I got that $50,000 up front, 468 was my effective purchase price. Yep. I rented the church out on a 2-year lease with a 2-year option at $45,000 a year plus GST, nearly 10% gross yield. So, it turned out all right.
Turned out okay.
Yeah.
So, but you eventually sold.
Yeah, look, the church was setting up a new church in the area, so they were starting from scratch, and their church didn't grow as quickly as planned, and within a year or so they started getting into rental arrears. When that got into several months in arrears, I decided to issue them a notice to leave. And again, coming back to the place of worship zoning, when I advertised it for lease, I knew that there would only be a small pool of potential tenants, and I didn't want to be left with an empty church for a year.
No.
So
had your shares recovered? Had you paid back your finance?
My shares never recovered, by the way. Okay. No. So I was hoping for them to come back.
You're still paying 8% to your mate at this stage?
Yeah, still paying 8%, okay. But the cash flow from the church was coming in
yep.
until the last few months when he started to get in arrears. So
sure.
I made an unusual decision for myself. I was just going to get rid of that property, keeping it as a church and not subdividing it. I couldn't add any value. I couldn't force appreciation. There was a possibility that it could take me a year to find another tenant.
Yep.
So I had all these capital losses from previous share investments. I thought, well, I'm not going to pay capital gains tax.
Nope.
Ipswich was booming at the time. Resi property gone up 15 or 20% over the next 12 years. I thought that might make the land values of commercial more attractive, and I end up selling it for $700,000 plus GST. So 770. I bought it for 515 including GST. Sold it for 770 including GST. About 18 months later.
Wow.
So turned out all right. Another. Just for the listeners, with the GST issue there, I had to get advice on that when I sold it as well, because initially I was going to tick the going concern box because there was an existing church in there, but because I'd given the church notice to leave, they were actually going to be out before settlement date.
Right.
So it was no longer going to be a going concern. We had to say 700 plus GST. It was going to be a vacant property.
Right.
So the buyer had to pay GST.
Sure. So let's just make this clear for our listeners, because one thing you have always said is that your whole strategy, with whatever you're doing is to buy and hold.
Yes.
Why was this one different?
There's a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, I had another empty office at this time that had been empty for about a year. I've also had a situation where that church could be empty for a year. I didn't want to be stuck with 2 commercial properties with no cash flow. There was a limited pool of tenants, being churches only. I'd lost my ability to add value on that site through a subdivision plan. Yep. I had a lot of capital losses there for tax purposes. I'm a real estate agent. I didn't have to pay another agent 3% commission to sell it. I'd developed a new passion for truck parking depots, and I wanted to expand my portfolio in a different asset class. All of those reasons combined led me to just stick it on the market and sell it.
Sure. So I guess a good learning for anyone listening there is, although you may have an overarching principle, which yours is to buy and hold, you don't have to always stick that. If circumstances, look at your whole set of circumstances, and you may go against one of your overarching principles. Absolutely, in order to get the best result at any one particular moment in time.
Yeah, a couple of key lessons from that deal. First of all, most importantly, make sure you get advice from an accountant or a lawyer if you're signing a commercial contract of sale, because GST is complicated and you don't want to be stuck with 10% extra cost or penalty there by making a mistake. Secondly, if you're buying a development site, put in a due diligence clause, get the due diligence done. If you can't subdivide it, you don't want to be stuck paying a premium for a development site that you can't develop.
Yep. Does that due diligence? I'm interested in that. That we talked about it at the start of this podcast, but I would imagine that's a good one when you are putting in an offer and you are the only one you're trying to get it off market, but it wouldn't be looked at favourably from a seller when there's competition.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of sellers go to auction. There's no conditions allowed in the contract of sale, but if a property is not going to auction and it's listed with a price, especially if it's been there for a while, well, then most development sites would be sold with a due diligence clause. And a lot of those due diligence clauses might be 6 months in duration, not 14 days, because they might actually want to go and meet with council and get some sort of warm feeling that a development approval will be given for whatever change of use the developer wants to do.
So just to finish me off, what was the ultimate profit out of the entire deal?
Look, I still haven't done the numbers. I just did the tax. It was 200 and something thousand profit, even though I made a mistake.
Yep,
and I didn't add any value to the site. I did nothing. I didn't improve it in any way, shape or form. I was perhaps lucky that I picked up a couple of $100,000 plus on that.
Yep. So still plenty to learn and another great story. So look, that probably wraps us up for this episode. But look, one thing I do want to remind our listeners: this whole podcast is about creating a community of like-minded investors who share and help each other out. So please do reach out to Andrew. You can find him at Professional Southport, and in the show notes there's always contact details. So that's the whole purpose of what we're doing here: sharing stories, sharing insights, and giving a lot of lessons to people along the way. But there will be Facebook groups and things that are put together through this, so that we can get a community of property investors talking and seeing what might even come from that. But again, Andrew, another great story. Can't wait for your next one, and look forward to catching on the next episode.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the Andrew Wright Property Podcast. This is all about building a community of like-minded investors who can share real-life stories, experiences, and collaborate with a view to helping each other. Join us. Get in touch through the link in the show notes. I look forward to you joining me on the next episode.